Hey guys, what's going on? It's Felwinter here, bringing you another Destiny 2 build video. Today we're going to be covering the Agers Scepter Hunter. Now, Agers Scepter, of course, is a fantastic weapon in its own right, but I feel like the Revenant kit is the best one to accentuate all of its strengths and compensate for some of its weaknesses. Agers Scepter is, of course, a stasis trace rifle, which has the ability to on-kill freeze any enemy within 5 meters of the target. But of course, its best function is its catalyst, Will Given Form, which allows you to slowly drain your full super energy and trade that for a massive 80% damage increase on top of the fact that the laser will now continually freeze whatever it is you're shooting at, meaning that you're also dealing extra shatter damage to the primary target. With all this in mind, we want to be stacking super generating effects on this build, so that way not only can we get to that super fast, so we can get into Will Given Form more often, we want to be able to maintain Will Given Form, so as that super is slowly draining, we can fight against that and build it back up. And everything in this build is designed around the idea of continually gaining more and more super energy to give fuel to Will Given Form. On top of that, Agers Scepter is a fantastic weapon to deal with all champion types because of the freeze and chill effects dealing with unstoppable and overload champions flawlessly. You also have the constant freeze of the catalyst, giving you access to being able to shut down barrier champions before they can even throw up their shield. On top of that, our energy weapon is completely open. You can use any anti-champion weapon you need for the situation that it calls for. Same thing with element. If there is a particular surge, feel free to customize your energy weapon accordingly to match the situation you need. Also, we have our heavy weapon slot open for big DPS options, which is always going to be good for this build. Let's go ahead and break down the subclass that we're running. Obviously, we're on Revenant to start. We're going to be using Silence and Squall, the only super. The fantastic thing about this compared to, say, Winter's Wrath or Glacial Quake on Warlock and Titan is the fact that this is a much shorter cooldown at base, which means that at tier 10, the base cooldown of this is just much shorter than the others, meaning we can get into the Will Given Form mode more often and stay in it for longer. Next up, we're going to be using Gambler's Dodge to refresh our shurikens. This is going to be important because we're going to be using a few different mods to increase the super generation on shuriken kills. So we want to be able to roll, get the shuriken back, and then throw another one, and just keep going in that gameplay loop. These are a great ranged melee tool. We're going to be running mods to get extra super energy on kills with them. So what you're going to want to be doing is setting up the kill by getting the enemy low and then finishing them off with a shuriken. For the grenade, I like to use Duskfield grenades. These obviously add an AoE slow to the build. This can be great for crowd controlling, but also it'll proc some of our other fragments and aspects just by slowing targets down. So this is just a really good tool to have in the kit. For the aspects, we're going to be running Grim Harvest and Touch of Winter. Grim Harvest is going to allow us to make stasis shards whenever we kill a slowed target, and Touch of Winter is going to expand the radius of our Duskfield grenade and also put a small stasis crystal in the center of it that we can detonate for even more shatter damage. For the fragments, we're going to be running Whisper of Hedrons. This is a great fragment for this build because every time we freeze an enemy, we're going to get plus 60 to all our core stats, recovery, mobility, and resilience, as well as some other gun buffs that will be pretty much active 100% of the time in this build. We're going to be rocking Whisper of Rime. This means that anytime we pick up a stasis shard, we'll start to get an overshield, which is our primary source of survivability in the build outside of just crowd controlling everything by freezing it. We're going to be running Whisper of Fissures. This is going to make our shatter damage hit that much harder and from a wider radius, which is going to be good because, again, we're going to be freezing targets constantly and shattering them left and right. And then this will also increase the damage of Will Given Form as we tunnel the laser into something and it is constantly freezing and shattering. It'll take more damage thanks to Whisper of Fissures. The next one is going to be Whisper of Conduction. This will allow us, whenever we create those stasis shards by killing a slowed or frozen target, they will actually track towards us, and then with Rime, we'll actually get overshields every time we pick one of them up. This makes it a lot more consistent to get those healing effects on you. And of course, it also gives us 10 resilience, 10 intellect, which are just fantastic stat bumps for the build. Lastly, the most important fragment to the build is Whisper of Bonds. Now, typically this one isn't even used that often, but what it does is every time you get a weapon kill on a frozen target, you get a chunk of super energy back. Now, with Agers Scepter, this fragment was literally made for this gun, because not only is this going to get you to your initial super quicker, but by getting kills rapidly, and then freezing the target next to the target, and then killing that target, and then keep going in that loop, you're going to be able to perpetually keep your catalyst buff rolling throughout an entire fight. For this build, the stat priority is 100 intellect. This is the most important stat in the build. This is going to give us those fast supers and maintain our catalyst buff for a longer period of time thanks to increased super energy regen. From there, we were looking for at least 40 in our resilience, mobility, and recovery, so that way Whisper of Hedrons can take us the rest of the way to 100. Now you can go higher than 40, I tend to, especially in resilience and mobility in this build, but feel free to put your stats wherever. As long as you hit that 100 intellect benchmark, you are good in this build. On our helmet, you want to run 1 copy of Stasis Siphon, 1 copy of Hands On, and 1 copy of Special Ammo Finder. The Stasis Siphon obviously will create orbs whenever we get a double kill with our Scepter. The Hands On will allow us to get extra super energy whenever we get a shuriken kill, so that's going to be really nice for our build. And of course, the Special Ammo Finder will allow us to keep our Agers Scepter well stocked with plenty of ammo for the fight. On our gloves, we want to run 2 copies of Stasis Loader and 1 copy of Heavy Handed. The 2 copies of Stasis Loader will allow us to reload our Scepter and our Stasis Heavy weapon more quickly, obviously, and then of course, Heavy Handed is going to generate an orb whenever we get a kill with the shuriken. So now not only are we getting extra super energy for the shuriken kill, thanks to Hands On our helmet, but Heavy Hand is going to make us an orb that we can pick up for even more super energy. Onto the chest piece. As is standard here, customize your resists accordingly to what you're doing. I prefer, in general, just to run 1 solar, 1 void, and 1 concussive dampener. But again, if there's a certain threat or a certain type of enemy that uses a particular element, make sure to customize your resists accordingly. Our boots are our exotic for the build, the Star Eater scales. Now, what this is going to allow us to do is whenever we pick up an orb, we actually gain even more super energy. So this means that whenever we get the double kill with the Agers, or we get a kill with the shuriken and we generate those orbs, or if teammates generate orbs for us and we pick those up, they're going to give us more super energy. This is fantastic for building up the initial super or keeping the super rolling as it's draining while Will Given Form is active. On the actual mods of the legs, we want to run 2 copies of Stasis Surge with 1 Stasis Scavenger. This will allow us to top off our Agers Scepter ammo and keep the damage up really nicely. With 2 copies of Surge, it's a 17% damage buff, and this stacks cumulatively with Will Given's Form 80%. Lastly, on the cloak, we're going to be rocking 1 copy of Time Dilation, 1 copy of Reaper, and then 1 copy of Bomber. The Time Dilation, of course, is just to extend the effect of our Surge mods from 10 to 15 seconds. The Reaper effect, of course, whenever we roll to get that shuriken back, our next weapon kill with the Scepter is going to give us another orb, so this will actually generate a second orb for us that we can pick up and gain enhanced super energy with, thanks to Star Eater scales. And then lastly, the copy of Bomber is just so that way when we roll, we get a little bit of that grenade energy back, so that way we can keep chucking out Dustfield grenades to get more slows and more CC. Onto the weapons, of course, we have Agers Scepter. This gun is absolutely fantastic, and even again, outside of this build, this is just a great gun in general, but this build is to make this gun in its most perfected version the strongest that it can possibly be. It's at its strongest, of course, when you have large groups of adds that can just chain freeze, but even again as a single target option, once that catalyst is active, it can rip through just about anything. For the energy weapon, I tend to favor a weapon that has a bit more range. The Agers Scepter is a close to medium range weapon, so having a medium to far range weapon like a pulse or a scout rifle is going to be your best option for generic gameplay. My preferred weapon is the Ogma, because it has adaptive munitions in the 3rd column to break shields. While Agers can do that just fine, I'd rather not waste the ammo trying to break a shield, and I just want to have something in my back pocket that can deal with that. But of course, anything that is champion dense, you want to run a weapon that obviously can counter those champions, or anything with a particular surge, obviously run something that can fit that element to get that extra 25% damage. I just like the Ogma for generic play. I think it's a fantastic weapon that you should give a shot. For the heavy weapons, of course, we're going to be rocking Stasis Rockets. There are 2 really good options, both craftable. The Palmyra D is a basically free quest weapon. This is my generic preferred rocket. It has tracking built in, and then of course you can put on auto loading and explosive light, so that way you can stow and go after a shot, have a nice damage buff, and just fire and forget, keep going, and just lay in with the Scepter in between shots of rockets. But if you need more just straight up DPS, Bump in the Night is going to be the option here. It has Chill Clip, which of course when combined with Galahorn does great single target DPS, and then your choice of either Demolitionist or auto-loading depending on how you want to play. I think both are really fantastic options. Bump of the Night doesn't have tracking, but instead it does a little bit more damage at base. So you got to weigh those 2 factors against each other when deciding what rocket you're going to be using. Lastly, if you need a linear fusion rifle, you obviously have the options of Reed's Regret or Fire and Forget, depending on what you have. Both are really good for any precision-based fights where you actually need a linear. Just some quick wrap-ups on the build. This is one of the best crowd-controlling builds in the game. It's right up there with any of the suspend-based strand classes. and it might even surpass them in some ways just because of the chain freezing capability, completely eliminating sections of the map. The versatility of your energy slot, being able to handle any champion or elemental need you may have, and then of course your heavy slot being able to commit to full damage. This build is very well rounded, can deal with basically anything you throw at it, and can excel in any PvE content. And that pretty much wraps up the build, guys. I think this one's going to be a lot more future-proof than my last build was. It's really solid, definitely worth your time to get all the items required to make this thing as strong as humanly possible, and it is super fun. I definitely recommend giving it a shot. Let me know what you think of the build down in the comments below, and if you've tried it, I'd love to hear about it. With all that being said, this is going to be Felwinter signing out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.